Welcome to the On the Ground Floor video and audio podcast. If you're listening to the audio of this episode and want to catch the video as well, just go to our YouTube channel, the Center for Worship Leadership. The On the Ground Floor podcast is conversations with real-life ministry leaders sharing the wisdom of their experience. The On the Ground Floor podcast is produced by the Center for Worship Leadership, Christ College, at Concordia University, Irvine, in California. For news and updates, go to our website, cwlonline.org.
Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to the third episode of On the Ground Floor. I'm your host, Matt Preston, and whether you are watching this recorded webcast or listening from your favorite podcast app, we here at the Center for Worship Leadership say thank you for tuning in, and we cannot wait for you to hear what our panel has to say today. 2020, what a year, right? I mean, come on. So many new challenges, so many exciting opportunities in ministry. And today we will be taking some time to reflect on the lessons that we've learned from this past year and just to encourage each other and each of you leaders. I want to remind you that you are not out there alone in this season. There's a whole group of worship ministers out there, tired just like you, excited just like you, and really wondering where we may be going next in 2021. And to that end, we have an awesome panel this month. As our discussion continues, we are going to focus on this past Christmas season, really dive into some thoughts on where the lessons we've learned could be leading us for 2021. So with that, I'd like to bring us back into the Christmas spirit of 2020 and open the ground floor panel up. Guys, introduce yourselves and tell us, what was your favorite gift, either given or received, from this past season?
I'm Anthony Celia. I'm at Water's Edge, Frisco, so just north of Dallas, Texas. I've been there about almost 12 years this February, and my favorite gift I got this year, my wife and I had our first son in the fall, and we were gifted matching pajamas for our entire family, including our cat. So there's a picture of us floating around the internet in matching plaid, and I didn't know my stepmom posted it, so everyone at church was like, I love the picture. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I am living the suburban dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That is awesome. I am Paul Cassidy. I'm at Christ Lincoln in Lincoln, Nebraska. Been here now, it's January, so I've actually been here a full year now. Came here in January of 2020, not knowing what 2020 was going to hold. And my role is worship arts director. And my favorite gift this year was, I'm going to call it time. We got to go visit my mom and brother in California, in obviously hazmat suits and everything, just to make sure. But it was the first time in 5 years that I was gone for more than one Sunday in a row. So that was pretty incredible to spend time with my family, my extended family, and everybody.
Unmute.
Hey, we're here for a technology podcast, right? My name is Max Murphy. I'm at Cornerstone Lutheran Church in central Indiana. And my favorite gift that I gave this Christmas was we surprised our kids with kind of a quick trip down to Disney. I think it was the day before Christmas or a couple of days before Christmas. We took them to the Disney store here in town and had them all buy masks. And they said, why are we buying masks here? And we said, well, they need masks. You need a mask when you go to Disney World. And so we spent a day at Hollywood Studios checking out the new Star Wars park. That was really lots of fun. We are a big Star Wars family, and it was awesome.
Nice, dude. Rolling over there. My name's Joel Letstone. I'm the multi-site director of worship at Woodbury Lutheran Church outside of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Gosh, this is gonna not be anywhere near as cool as you guys, but it's what I thought of in advance, so I'll just go with it. I'm building out the inventory of smart devices in my home, and so I got to add some sensors, motion sensors and light sensors, and it's the sort of thing where even this morning I walked down the stairs to get my cup of coffee and the lights turn on for me. And then the other one, I've got a smart switch for the pantry because my kids are constantly leaving the light on, when they leave. And so it turns off after 90 seconds automatically now, which is annoying when we're loading in groceries. But otherwise, it keeps me from getting, like, kids, turn off the lights, So, yeah, smart stuff. I could totally mess with my family right now. I'm gonna no.
Teach them a lesson.
That's right.
Yeah.
What are some of the unique challenges, and maybe they don't have to be unique, but for you guys, what were some challenges that came up during this Christmas season that you guys had to overcome in a ministry as whole? I mean, I'm sure the list is long, but what, go from there, kind of share some of your challenges you guys had.
Well, I think for us, we had to decide what engagement looked like, and worship is not just worship is a two-way street, and so we can receive God's gifts in many different ways. But then, how do we respond, and what does it look like as a community of faith to respond? So how do you foster this worship back and forth in a distancing world? And for us, I don't know that we came up with a good answer, but we did a bunch of things hoping that something would help us get in that direction.
Yeah, that's good. Piggybacking on that, Max, I think for me, it kind of reinforced, the things that you've been feeling, maybe having in private conversations outside of the church context, that just, we know that worship is more than just an event on Sundays. We know that being part of the church is more than just showing up once every 3 weeks or whatever regular church attendance is in 2020, 2021. But the experience of 2020 made us confront it as a ministry. You said, Max, engagement. How do we define engagement? How do we define being part of the church, being part of worship, being part of community? Those kinds of questions really became the big questions for us, I think.
Ooh, man, that's a great question. Great answers so far, you guys. People might sit back and listen to what we're saying and say, "Oh, that's a really interesting sermon." And even if they're in the room, that doesn't necessarily mean it's increasing their faith or their trust in Jesus and what He's done for us. Necessarily, it's just that it kept our attention. People might say, "Man, the band sounds great today," but that's not the same as them actually beginning to sing and express their own heart language, their own gratitude, or surrender, perhaps to God. And I have that question when I'm sitting at the piano or standing in the back of the room and watching when there's people in the room. And so now you put them in their living room and like the band sounds amazing. The camera work is getting better, whatever. And you have no idea, none whatsoever. And so that's just, I think I just restated the problem. I don't know that I gave any answers, but
Right.
Oh, yes.
I think for us. Go. You got more, Joel?
Well, I was just thinking. The conversation of missional or attractional and whatnot. I feel like I've always enjoyed the making it engaging sort of stuff, and so that's I think just what's been especially hard for me is that I just don't know what's sticking and what's not. Can't even tell. I guess that's the challenge. Sorry, Anthony. Go ahead.
Oh no, I think kind of what Paul was saying. It kind of made us. Really see if we believe what we've been preaching for the last however many years I've been there, where worship is not just measuring butts and seats and like your offering. Mm-hmm. And like, that's great in theory until you're like, oh, there's no butts in the seat. And are we going to be able to pay salaries this month? Mm-hmm. But I think for us, we're still working through that. And I know for me, as I'm planning a service and then just how do you engage with people outside? Texas has been open. Like, we've been back in public worship since May, but it's still only like a third of our congregation's back. But the time we were in total lockdown, we just did Zoom worship and really seeing how these families engage with one another, like in the home, and creating resources where, like, we always tell our people, you're the primary disciple makers in your house, like not our youth director, not the pastor. And then like our people went like, oh, we can actually do this, And then once we came back to worship, I'm wondering, are they just back in that consumer mode? Okay, now the professionals can just give me my goods and services. So we're trying to, how do we even in the gathered, whether you're gathering with us online or in the building, How are we making that more of a family experience, more of engaging a conversation back and forth? Okay, actually tell the people next to you, you are forgiven, Okay, so we're just trying to see how do we actually make that something that is forming them for the rest of the week, throughout the rest of their discipleship process, not just sitting there and hearing a sermon and some good music and then go home, So we don't have any answers. We're just processing that stuff now.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Oh, you good?
No, I was just wondering, like Anthony, I don't know if your church is like ours, where Nebraska has been open for a while for churches. So we have people back in the room, but we still have more than half the people who used to be in the room not. Right? But people are back, which means we're now refocused mostly on them.
Yeah.
Knowing that like 60 to 70% of the people aren't there. I don't know. Splitting the focus is a huge challenge.
Yeah. We're just, as presenters, getting better at learning how, like, hey, and at home, don't, like, or like right. For Christmas Eve, like, hey, if you're going to be at home, like we said the Sunday before, make sure you get a candle for Silent Night, just things like that. So
yeah, that's good.
It's, but there's been weeks where we didn't stream one service. I'm still talking to the camera. I'm like, oh wait, we're not streaming this one. So it's just a back and forth.
Yeah.
The philosophical, that whole idea of, how much do we allow the COVID epidemic to change our own understanding of what it means to be a community and a worshiping body and all of that. We're still doing pre-recorded. Obviously we did pre-recorded there for a while when we couldn't meet in person, but like Texas and other places in the Midwest, we were able to go back fairly early, but we have continued to do the pre-recorded, which is our highest attended, if you will, on a weekend service. And then we also do live streaming of the live services so that people see, because some people want to worship with an online community that's not recorded earlier in the week. Some people actually want to be worshiping at the same time as the other group of people. So we do a lot of live streaming, and then we do a pre-recorded for both our traditional and contemporary. But the question is, are we making it too easy? Because I've talked to more than one person that said it's just way too easy to not get my kids ready in the morning, but we just go into the living room and turn it on the big screen, and we, in our pajamas, we have church together. And they could come to church, but maybe, are we making it too easy to not come in person? And so I guess that's one of the challenges, the struggles is moving forward. What does this look like? What if the pandemic completely ended tomorrow? Would we still do pre-recorded, or will we still stream how much is it driving what we think is valuable in ministry?
I think for us, the biggest challenge was no matter what decision you make, it's right for 50% and wrong for 50%. And I think we just kind of called that out, like, hey, we're coming back live to worship. Half of you are upset. Half of you said we should have never shut down, and that's like, even among so my band, we've been playing the same core guys for like 12 years. I haven't seen my bass player in 9 months because he won't come until he's vaccinated, So, but through that, I got some more volunteers and another great guy to join our church family and stuff. So that was the struggle of just, how do you pastor people? Okay, I hear you. This is why we made the decision. Can you please show us some grace? And even our elders, in the home, they might be divided over something. So just how do you pastor people through that? So when we come on the other side of this, we still have a family who loves each other. And I think if anything, it's been a really good chance for us to, in that struggle, teach on hey, we've always talked about let's love one another. And it's really great when everything gets along, but now it's wow, as a church family, we actually have some things that could really divide us and Satan could get in there. So how do we lead people through the adversity, and then you throw an election on top of that in Texas, oh, that was just fun, it's just, wow. Matt's going, yeah, I'm and it just was, if I'm being honest, I'm from LA, born and raised, so I moved to the South, what is going on here? This is insane, So it's just, how do you take the, for me, it's really been less about the worship service and how we do worship and all that, but how do you actually shepherd people's hearts and souls? And this has brought up, I think, a lot of the true colors of a lot of people, for good and for bad, in myself even. Like, ooh, I didn't realize that was an idol. I didn't realize I actually held on to that more than I thought I did, So just how do you make decisions going forward, knowing that no one's ever had to make these decisions before? And for us, the answer to that was just be really frank with our congregation. Like, hey, we've never had to do this. Just show us some grace. And our church has always been very flexible, where it's like, all right, we're going to shut that down and start this now because that didn't work. So we kind of already have that culture built in. And we're a smaller congregation. I couldn't imagine the multi-site stuff. I'm sitting there going like, oh my goodness. Like, I've never even thought of those things. So God bless you guys.
Hey, Anthony, to piggyback on what you were just saying, not about the multi-site, but before that, we actually, as our pastoral staff, thinking about preaching themes for the next year, we spent a lot of time saying, what have we learned about ourselves and about God and about faith and about community and about church? That's what it's called Keep the Faith. That's the name of this. Like, the next year is just going to be called Keep the Faith. And we're going to talk about all of what has COVID done for us and how can we use it as a teachable moment moving forward. So I'm really looking forward, because all of those things you were talking about, we're going to have a chance to, maybe out of the pressure of the first 9 months of COVID, and now that people are getting vaccinated and slowly people are coming back, hey, let's look back and use it as a teachable moment for ourselves and for our church.
With that, like, I would love to hear from you guys. Like, did you guys feel that struggle as leadership? Like, do we speak to everything that's happening in the culture every single Sunday? Or it's like, we need to preach the gospel this morning and not be tone deaf. We were running into that struggle a lot. Like, when the riots started breaking out, like, okay, how do we address that? Okay, when election, how do we do all these things, and kind of at times not losing sight of what we're called to do, proclaim the forgiveness of sins through Christ, but not be tone deaf to like, oh yeah, half the country's in a riot right now. I think that was a big struggle also, of how do you shepherd these people, their hearts, when they're not in the building and they're scared and the world's falling apart. So send me your sermon series, Max, when you're done. So
yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that we learned is that you've got to, the gospel and scripture is pertinent to everything that's happening right now. And so, so much, all it does when we're in a crisis, it just peels back this thin veneer of us thinking we have everything together when we don't. And the answer is always what we have in the gospel, regardless of if it's riots or COVID or whatever. It's all pointing to this depravity that we have in humanity because of sin, that's only answered through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. So if that's what you're focused on as a church, it's not a hard pivot to deal with anything, because it is the same answer.
What's interesting though is and Paul, you guys use the parable preaching type, concept or whatever there is, that Jesus is recorded in scripture addressing the people that are in the room and their experiences, or in the space and their experiences that they're dealing with the language he chooses to still convey the exact same thing. So the kingdom of heaven is like, and here's an example for you and for you and for you and for you, in case you're a treasure hunter, in case you're a and so for us, Anthony, like the question we've been having is how often do we directly address a scenario? And with George Floyd, for example, happening right here in our own backyard, we did a whole series called 1010. 1010 is police code for fight in progress. And then we use John 10:10, Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And we talked about how he was stealing. Oh, and then we paired that with Micah 6:8, walk humbly, love mercy. And what's the third one, for crying out loud? Pastors.
Justin.
Come on. Yeah, that.
Justin,
so,
right?
Yeah, and in a weird sort of way, it was like Satan is busy destroying each of those three things, and we're seeing it right here in our own backyard. So we applied the gospel to it. Our graphic and everything was all about the city. Our bumpers and everything was addressing what's happening. but we probably ended up saying the exact same thing we always say every Sunday. Max, to your point,
That's good.
so start with what's happening and finish in the exact same place. I always call it the slant, the spin, or the package, which, like, what's the look, vibe, and feel of this particular weekend where we say the exact same thing,
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Man, I don't know if you're ready to move on or not, but what I love about this panel right now is, Anthony, I know you're a pastor. Max, I know you're a pastor, and I appreciate hearing that shepherding sort of piece that you bring to it. And while I do that within my own teams, and I certainly speak into what our pastors are talking about and ask questions to try to understand it, I go to work in my role as a worship director specifically in making sure our teams and our content and our planning processes are prepared to handle whatever they decide. I get a voice in it, but ultimately, just I'm a servant of the word, and I lead to my pastor's decisions, challenged at times, obviously, but still that's their thing. And I love hearing that voice that you guys seem to carry, which is unique, or at least not as much as I think about that way. And so the challenge that we were having, at least in my role, was the runway got a whole lot shorter, because we shut down. And then at first, when we shut down, our senior pastor said, we'll probably just be doing this for 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, have you seen the news? But I think he's also an eternal optimist and an idealist sort of thing. It just took us a while. And then suddenly we were closed for months, but then summer hit here and it was like, let's go outside. And I was like, okay, when? He's like, let's do it Sunday. And I'm like, oh, and then it was like, let's do something big out on the land. And we turned on these big festival style worship services then at that point. And Steve, I know he's got a couple of pictures, but it was like, at that point, it was like, let's gather everybody who's been stuck inside to gather outside. And it was like, with 2 weeks notice, we put together a car show, food, 2 extra bands to have on Saturday nights, rented additional sound system and gear and stuff like that. And then it was like, how often are we going to do this? He's like, well, let's see how it goes. I'm like, well, snap. I may or may not need, a master crew next week, And then it was like, that was amazing. Wow. Let's do it again. I'm like, oh, when? It's like, well, let's go back to the parking lot first and do there locally, just, real small. And then let's do another big one. And so it's like, instead of a 8 to 12 week runway, it suddenly was 2 to 4 weeks long. And so what our teams learned was to be incredibly flexible and be ready to jump in wherever we need to be, which is, frankly, what I've been looking for the whole time anyway. Let's be nimble and quick and responsive and ready to address, the needs as they come our way. And it was a challenge, but it's something now that we've stretched and grown because of it. I don't know, just from the producer planner side here, not the pastoral, loving side that you guys are bringing to the table. It's like, how do we get our job done?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, for you guys, during all the craziness and I know out here we've had a lot of, like Paul was saying, like 1 week to the next is completely different, depending on the numbers and stuff like that, on what's going to happen and how many volunteers we can have in control room or how many volunteers can be on stage and stuff like that. I'm curious to hear real examples from you guys. How did you keep your people engaged? How did you keep them prepped? How did you talk? I'm assuming you talked to them and not just left them off the hook, but but like, how did you guys engage in that with your people that you're ministering and kind of over?
Well, going back to Anthony's comments earlier, I mean, half the band wanted to be right back and half the band didn't want to. And I haven't had some of my longtime members, like, that still have not played. So that was, you kind of have to give people permission to not be a part of it and not make them feel guilty or bad, but at the same time, express that there is a need and we have this ability. And some people want to be together, so that it created a new type of bond, I think, because people were isolated so much. It gave a chance for people to come together and do something normal a little bit. And just with that, I don't know that we were going to go there, but one of the most incredible things for me that impacted me as we're looking at that for COVID was seeing tears flow down people's faces when they came to our private communion services. We did these small, 6 people could come 15 minutes at a time, especially people that weren't coming to church at all. They hadn't been to church in months and months and months, but they wanted to come and receive Holy Communion. Just this, I mean, it's our life, but it's a lot of people's lives as well. I mean, church is really, really an important thing for our people, and we have to figure out ways to engage and not just write off this gift of community that we have in church, and not easily say, oh, well, that'll substitute, online is fine. That's all they need, or whatever. Just how can we engage people in ways that are impactful and meaningful to them?
I know a challenge that we had with that is when we made the choice to start one online campus and invite everybody to it, our community got really, really small, because what I needed to do was make a decision that met the criteria that Pastor Tom threw out right away. Is like, we need to put our best foot forward, on this sort of thing, because we're, for us, we weren't multi-tracking music every week. Who's got time for that necessarily? And so we're like mixing in real time, which means we need to try to get it right from the get-go pretty much. And at the same time, get a worship leader from Oak Hill campus, our worship leader from Liberty Ridge campus, our worship leader from the Valley Creek campus, and maybe a band member or 2 from each of the places, so that when people tune into this all new campus that we've never had before, there's at least someone that they recognize, because, while we weren't together in community, we wanted to at least have a face that we recognized. Because if I went to Oak Hill, I didn't know anyone from Liberty Ridge. And if I didn't even see my worship leader and my pastor preached every 3 weeks, suddenly there was this gap, besides virtually, like even just facial recognition, that doesn't apply to this, strictly, but like that idea of got to have people there. So we had the same, and I love big bands. So it was the same drum, bass, electric, acoustic, keys, violin, viola, cello, piano, synth, vocoder, and then worship leader. So there's like 15, 16 of us producing some really fun music, frankly, 6 feet apart with X's on the floor. And it was kind of, here's a couple from this campus, a couple from this campus. And the rest of our teams dropped off the face of the earth in terms of the execution of it for like 9 months. And we would do monthly updates on, hey, here's what's going on. And then finally, when we started opening up again, it was who's comfortable to come back. And so now we've got an online personality, and I've returned, like one of our worship leaders is now not even on our staff anymore. The campus closed. One of our worship leaders became our executive director to help coordinate everything. And so I sent our other worship leader back to her own campus and have pulled people in to start to develop its own unique personality now, that everybody's been in this thing for a while. And then we're returning some of our own people back to their specific campuses. So we're running multiple teams at multiple campuses, all to bring people back in, little by little as they're comfortable. What was the question? No, I'm kidding. Can you repeat the question?
My next question is, in typical years, as soon as Christmas is over, you get a break a little bit, you come back in January and you go, okay, now what are we doing next? And I guess my question is, what have you learned during your Christmas season that is probably going to carry over? What was something good or bad where you're just like, okay, for Easter this year, we need to really think about this or really focus on this? Because I think some of it is like, we're still not really sure what Easter's going to look like coming up. And definitely Easter's not going to be the same as it's always been, quote unquote. So, what are some of those things that you can take away from Christmas, or that you have already taken away from Christmas, and you're like, I'm going to implement this for 2021?
Go, Paul.
You sure?
I'm sure.
All right. Well, Anthony maybe or Max or Joel, somebody earlier said, we're encountering a bunch of questions that no one's ever had to ask before in church, right? Like we've never been in a global pandemic with the technology to stream worship into a home. Like we're asking a bunch of new questions, and in Christmas, there was a ton of mental and emotional and physical energy put toward just making the logistical decisions of what that's going to look like. You have to space, but not if you live with somebody, right? Like your family can sit by you. So how do we set up chairs so that we're not having to split up families or push more chairs together, and we don't have a whole bunch of empty seats? We can get as many people as possible in while respecting all the, a lot of those kinds of decisions took a lot of people, mental energy, physical energy to execute, just emotional energy of a plan and then a changed plan, because key leaders hadn't seen this and encountered this before. Now that we have, we're simply just copy and pasting a lot of the things that did work from Christmas to Easter. So a lot of the things that were a heartache to decide on for Christmas are already decided for Easter. Assuming that there isn't a major COVID shift, we know how we're going to execute a bunch of the stuff. So now we're looking at focusing more of our attention on how do we engage people in their smaller, more comfortable communities if they're not comfortable being in the large, enclosed address where we are right now. So not necessarily in their homes as individuals, although some people will experience it that way, but rather they invite people over for dinner. We have very few people who have been truly isolated since March of 2020. Even if they're not comfortable coming back to church, they're comfortable gathering with certain people. So how do we equip them to gather together to worship our God together with us for Easter from whoever has the biggest house or whatever?
Yeah.
We're kind of taking what we learned from Christmas. So my drummer got COVID 2 days before Christmas Eve. So I'm like, oh, great. And my seniors response is hire whoever. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to hire some guy that I've never played with on Christmas Eve. And those are we all know those Christmas and Easter, let's shine, band. This is what we've been training for all year. And I'm like, well, we're just going 2 acoustic guitars, and my lead player will just play some pad stuff. And that's what we're going to do. And that's what our church needed. We actually heard each other sing, and it was beautiful, and it didn't stress me out. I wasn't going to have to pay a drummer $1,000 or something to come, and I didn't know anyone. So, and part of me, it was a shift of that consumer thing again. Well, does Christmas have to be big and hyped? Jesus didn't come in a big hyped way, and now I'm thinking that way for Easter. This morning I started putting sets together for Holy Week because I was oh, that's Ash Wednesdays in a couple of weeks. Oh, let's get on that. But now I know in my head, if I have to shift, it's not gonna, and no one left Christmas Eve going where was the guitar solo? They were that was beautiful. Thank you. So going into Easter, just knowing the whole thing might shift. And we're in Texas, so I think COVID is over, but kidding. But we just, Matt, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So it's just, it let me know what we've done since I've been there of those. And it's not even a bigger production, just putting a lot of energy into making the music extra special. It's really no one noticed. So it's kind of taken some pressure off of our team. And also just in the back of my head, I have a contingency plan. What if it shuts down the week before Easter? How are we going to get the recording done? So I have those things ready to pull, because I recorded a bunch of Christmas songs from my office just in case, because my boss had gotten COVID. So if I got COVID, what would we do? So I just had all that stuff ready in case it happened. We weren't completely just scrambling. So yeah, we'll just move forward, and I don't think anything's gonna be too different from Christmas in the sense of people and spacing and all that stuff. So
So for our Christmas services, historically, we've had 10 to 12 Christmas services. And there's about 4 contemporary, 5 contemporary or so, and then 6 traditional services. This year, we decided that everybody was going to do exactly the same service, just with the same music, but either led by a band or led by the organ or the choir or whatever. So we did one single service order for every worship service at all of our sites. And then rather than having musicians at all the different choirs and strings and orchestra and different things that they do in different places, we spent a Saturday beforehand recording all the special music, video and audio, had it all mixed down, and we had all of them ready to go. And so at our different sites, we played in the service the videos of our musicians doing different things for the special pieces. Not everybody sang Christmas carols, obviously, on Christmas Eve, but everybody was able to experience the same music and quality of music at all of our sites, at all of our, and so our traditional folks it was a little apprehensive at the beginning, but once it was done and they saw the quality of what we were able to do in the recording process, and everybody was able to see everybody, it was a really powerful thing for our congregation, because we have so many services on a weekend in different sites. And so I think moving forward, we're going to be doing more large production pieces so that everybody can see what's going on. And it took a lot of the pressure off. Like Anthony was saying, he had things just in case he wasn't able to do it. But for us, it took a lot of the pressure off of Christmas Eve itself, because we're doing so many services that it's all pretty much done. We just got to play the video and make sure that works, So that was, I think we will do that moving forward, and we will do a lot more. There you go.
All right, I'll go. Max, how many services did you guys do?
Between December 23rd and the December 25th, Christmas Day, I think we had 13 or 14 services.
Yeah, we had like 15 or 16. Yeah, that's it. 15. No.
I had 2.
That's a lie, Joel. I know you didn't have that many.
No, it was 17 between online and in person and campus.
No, those are
Christmas
just
Eve and
online.
Christmas Day.
They're just in-person services, not online.
Yeah, gosh. What's interesting is we're in the process right now of deciding what format to do, and we have online services that we're still filming in advance. Tuesday night music, stereo live mixing, filming with 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras. No post-production works whatsoever. And then we film our service content, separately on a different day for the online thing. But we've started in-person stuff and have been doing that like since September, except for like 3 weeks we did a shutdown, kind of an emergency shutdown. But we haven't started live streaming what's happening in person yet, because we've created this online campus. So now we're wondering, okay, does that mean now for Easter that we're filming a big production in advance and doing in-person services like we've been doing? Or do we do a hybrid type thing now where we film some stuff that gets shared, Max, kind of like what you're saying, like a feature elements, and they're not necessarily music, but it's something we saw, like, for our Christmas stuff, we did a massive 2-day multi-track recording, and then 2 weeks later we were supposed to film it. We had a COVID breakout on our staff, had to shut down the venue, cancel the rentals, return the truck, send back the cameras, everything that we had rented. Otherwise, I was going to potentially knock out all of our best musicians and all of our pastors, because we were doing a 12-hour video shoot one day off-site. And so I'm thinking at Christmas time, I'm like, kind of like you, Anthony, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? We had every egg in that basket. Every one of them was in that basket. And we knew we were going to do live, but for our online strategy, which we really, really poured into, that was it. and it went off well. So do we film like an Easter special type thing with all the multi-track and go off site and film something on a hill far away, and do we do something, cinematic? We've got a filmmaker guy on our staff and do that, or do we just live stream from a venue? We haven't landed on what we're going to do yet for Easter. We know what we're going to do for Good Friday, but we're just shy of Easter, Matt. So tough question.
Well, then good. I hope this is encouragement to get you guys to start thinking about it. We're under 90 days, by the way.
Yeah.
So not to give any extra stress to your life, but I think
Can
we're
Christ
in the
just
70s.
Can Christ just return between now and then and just be done? We're done.
It's great. We're actually starting a series in Lent called End Times. Are you still watching? And it's based on Matthew 24. Stay alert, and it looks just like Netflix, and it's stay alert, keep watch, all this and that. So I'm hoping that it happens actually.
So
My last Easter was great.
I got one last question for you guys. So this is if you follow sports or other talk show things, I'm trying to implement this into every episode now, but it's something called a hot take. So just the idea of you don't have to be right, you don't have to be wrong, you could be right, but just the idea of, do you got anything you want to lay down on the gauntlet and say for 2021, this is going to happen in the church from now on, or things like that. Like a hot take would be, I don't think we're going to get rid of online services. That's an obvious low-hanging fruit hot take. So for this one,
lukewarm take.
Yeah, it's a lukewarm take. It's not so hot there. But anybody want to give us a hot take? Be on record.
I think if things do open up to whatever the future is going to be normal, a far less people are going to come back than we think. Even if you took away online services, I don't think, especially the younger generations, like the stuff like Barna Group and all of them are showing, millennials and stuff, they aren't watching. They're done. And I do a lot of young adult ministry and they're checked out. So it breaks my heart because it shows we didn't disciple for the last however many years. So that's my prediction. We're going to be, I think our attendance where we're at now is probably going to be about where it is for the next couple of years. And I normally see things as half empty, so that's just my tendency.
It's a hot take. It's a hot take. There's no judgment on that.
I want to piggyback on Anthony. I feel like the churches that are more maybe conservative or old school, I think will gain through this because of the ways that they understand and do community. And I think that some of the larger churches might in numbers, or that might not suffer quite as much, but in maybe effectiveness or discipleship or whatever. I just feel like the old way of doing things is there's going to be new value seen in them.
Yeah.
You said that very well. I think I like that.
Yeah, I hear both of you saying basically, in some sense, that there's going to have to be a larger focus on discipleship moving forward. In some sense, like whether you were already killing it or not, the challenge moving forward is probably going to be discipleship.
Well, I think for the church, for us as leaders, let's focus on who God's brought, and not that we forget who's out there, but like it'll be really easy to be like, how do we go get all those people and ignore the people that's there? Because I think for a lot of churches, after all this goes away, or like the people are there, like they're there, they're not going anywhere. So let's focus on them and disciple them, so that they can go out into their communities and actually go fulfill the Great Commission. Like, let's equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, instead of just being like, we're half empty. So
my hot take kind of piggybacks on Anthony a little bit then. the, equipping people to go out and fulfill the Great Commission. I think 2020 showed us how fragile the Western model for doing church is. Joel, I think two of you at least mentioned like changes happening because a couple people got COVID. And so either out of caution you shut down, or out of caution you just spent a week recording songs in your office. Or like we have a pyramid where like if the two guys at the top or girls or whoever, like if you have a female worship leader, right, whatever, if they go out, like what are we going to do? We have a theology that tells us that our churches are full of priests, right? Priests of all believers. But we have a practice that says if you can't physically be at an address with somebody who had the time and money to go to a whole bunch of years of education, you can't do worship. I don't know if that's going to change in the Lutheran Church, but I think in the church at large, that fragility is going to be recognized, and there's going to be shifts. I think that people will start shifting into who was it? I just heard from one of these big church groups that works with churches to grow and whatever. That it went from the mega church to the multi-site church to the micro church now is like the new thing that's starting to pick up steam. That's the thing to do, and that's much less fragile, right? The micro church, like the government can say, people are getting sick, don't go to church in a large group, and you can be like, well, it's 12 of us at Bill's house. Like we can still do that. We can pray together, worship together. That's my hot take.
Joel, you got one?
Yeah. Online church will become more of a front door than a back door. Says Carrie Newhoff. Yeah, that's not me. I just quickly Googled. That's number 9 on the list. I just scrolled through quickly and I was like, that's a really good question. Online church will supplement the journey, not become the journey. I thought that's interesting. We've had a few people walk in our doors and said, we've been watching through COVID and we decided to come check out your church. We've met maybe 3 families that way. It's interesting, and this is for those of us that are in the weekly cycle of recording content to play in an online church, it's possible, and it's a decision we've started to make here, that we're removing some elements that timestamp the content that we create. And we discovered that when we were recording Christmas music, because you needed white stoles on the altar for one thing and then blue paraments on the other thing. And so we've got 16 musicians, 4 camera people, man hours of rehearsal, and we can use the song one time.
Yeah.
Like that's expensive content, And how important was it? I guess, and I'm like, why? Does the color matter? Really? I mean, really? And so now when we record music, we remove all the paraments so that the timestamp is taken away, because that has, at least in our minds, more to do with what we're saying on the journey of discipleship, and not necessarily down to the small thing that they're seeing. And it's interesting because it's like, I wonder if some of these big churches in non-denominational worlds have been making decisions for these strategies for years, or if it was never part of their tradition in the first place. Maybe not part of their tradition, but that might be why they're able to do some stuff that they're able to do at the same time. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I know which came first. It's probably not part of their tradition, but there's a ton of flexibility that comes by removing a timestamp.
But I thought you were going to go the other way, Joel. I thought you were going to be more intentional in timestamping to make it more authentic and real. So before you go on, my fear, and the reason I had my hot take, is that what we're doing is we're making our faith too extraneous, or we're making our faith too much. It's too pliable, and it's just not real. Like it's a virtual faith, and so I guess maybe younger kids can identify with a virtual faith, but if my faith is connected to something that was recorded last week or last month or 2 months ago, and it's not in front of a group of other believers, and there's just something about being in a worship service with other people singing a song, or even worshiping along with a group of people that are in person worshiping right at this moment, which is why we do the live stream. So in some ways, are we just etching away at what it means to be a Christian and a part of a family of faith? And therefore we shouldn't be surprised when people are falling away because we're chipping away at the foundations. I don't know.
You know, it's interesting. If when something was authored or recorded becomes what makes it relevant, then we have to throw the entire thing.
Those are two different things, Joel.
Because I was just like, hold on. I mean,
that's a straw man.
Well, I know. Honestly, it's a good question you're asking, and we gather to record, and there's no one in the room when we're doing this stuff, and it's like, and so we're trying to be a little more free. Like when we finish songs, we're not just saying cut, let's go on. It's like we hang there for a moment and try to, I don't know. Yeah, dude, I don't know. It's just something we stumbled into because, again, it's like the fragility thing, perhaps. If something happens and we can't get together next Tuesday to record a fresh round of content, we can't play that song because it's got blue on it. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if
so
you're
it's
making
a bit of
it
a safety
seem,
net, maybe not a prediction, perhaps. I don't know.
But
like I said, I don't even know why I'm here.
No, you got it though, Joe. Because if you make it seem like, if you pretend like it's live, then forget the blue pyramid. Can you simulate a live stream it if everybody knows the drummer has COVID? Right?
Yeah.
Like if you're making people think that you're really there on Sunday. Now that you're open.
No, they know we're not.
Right. They know you're not. But if we had to answer that question, if we're making it seem like we are, what do we do if we have somebody on stage who now shouldn't be?
And that's why they all wear their masks.
So Billy Joel was going to do a free concert in New York, and he was going to live stream a live concert, and he ended up not doing it. And they just played some old concert footage of him. I didn't watch it, but when he was going to be live in New York at Madison Square Garden or whatever, I was going to tune in and watch the service because I was going to be connected to him leading songs at that moment. If he would have recorded it a week earlier and then showed it, I probably wouldn't have watched it. No, I didn't watch it because they didn't show it. So,
but that's what our church and your church is doing right now, right? We're filming stuff.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying that's why I'm saying are we in doing that? Are we losing something? I know Celia has a hot take on this. Go, man.
Oh, I just heard someone say that the new worship wars is going to be online or in-person church going into the future. And I feel like I'm going to be the old school. It's got to be the Oregon where I'm like, church is in person. Like for me, like it's a supplement, but like I'm almost willing to plant my flag there. And like and that's not to diminish what you guys are doing some amazing things, but I know like, I think it's a great tool to help those who can't come. But if we make it like this virtual faith, like I know as I work with a lot of the young adults and stuff, they're not watching. They're gone. Our young adult ministry went from 50 to 12 people, like that. And I call the other people and they're like, I'm done. Like, I'm not watching you online. Like, that's boring, So I don't know. It's going to be, I have no idea what's going to happen. I think it's going to have to be part of the church. But if we just see ourselves as content makers for the next, like, who knows, I would hate to see like you can get a certification in whatever sacramental online sacramental ministry. Like, I don't know what that's going to be, but we're humans, we're flesh and bones. Like, we're meant to be together, and hopefully, Lord willing, I have no idea.
I think that's something, like people smarter than us are going to be debating this for way longer and for centuries probably. But I think to me, it's always been interesting in this moment where I've noticed there's kind of maybe three camps. So you have a group of people that have to do online ministry because that's what they have to do. That's their only way of getting the gospel at this moment, whether
Yeah.
they're in hospice or in the hospital or whatever. Like, that is how they are being ministered, and they have to get it that way. Then I think outside of that, there's either generational or maybe just mindset differences where, like, I think maybe my generation is on the verge where it's like, I still remember a landline telephone, and but I also experienced the internet from a young child. But then I see a lot of kids in school now, at our day school, and that generation, like, they don't see necessarily a big, huge difference between online camera. Like, they don't see a gap between physical presence and online presence as much as we do. I know my mom and dad hate it. They don't really like Skyping or FaceTiming. There's those 5 months, that, like, they hate it. I don't mind it, but I still miss people, but I miss them less. And then there's other people where my best friends across the world, and I feel no different whether or not they're there or not, And so I think it's interesting to see where some of this is going to roll. I don't know if it's hot take, man. This hot take. So
Is it just my mom that does this then? Or is that
No, not just your mom.
okay?
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate the conversation today. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation today, guys. To the listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of On the Ground Floor, which is a part of the Center for Worship Leadership Podcast Network. I hope you guys were encouraged by the conversation as much as I was. And if you are looking for more content or just want to continue the conversation, make sure to head on over to our website, cwlonline.org, where you can find articles written by guest authors. Our new Psalm library is up. It's super awesome. We have free liturgies available for you guys to use in your churches, and links to 2 of our other podcast shows here at the Center for Worship Leadership. Now, on behalf of myself and this episode's Ground Floor panel, thank you for spending your time with us today, and I will see you here next month on the ground floor. Guys, say goodbye.
See ya.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.